Okay, all right. I'll tell you what we're going to do in here. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to drag our feet for about 5 minutes because I understand that they're running late down in the vendor hall, and so that's good. And where I am on this presentation from this morning, I'm about 20 slides out from being done, which I think I calculated to almost exactly the same amount of time that I got shorted on the front end, so it all worked out fine. We're going to plug it back in. I'm not bitter. What I had planned to do in this seminar, though, and what I think we can still do, I'll let you all decide what you want to do. I've got 3 or 4 other PowerPoints on this same flash drive, and I can pull out pieces of those if we have a specific topic, and I'm going to run through a couple of topics that you all would like to talk about, or we may just do something together that's in a day and age where everything that we see in these presentations is PowerPoint driven. We might have an actual conversation, which could be fun. I'm going to get into, with a little more specificity, some selection. The tail end of this, I'll sort of tease us a little bit with our bounce back heifer development project that we've been working on for 13 years. I can go back and get into that with more detail if you all have an interest in that. I have a piece on animal behavior and heifer development, specifically to sort for abnormal behavior at calving. That's interesting to some people. I have a piece that's about 35 slides long on using genetic variables for the target that is feeder calf marketing in traditional marketing pools and how to achieve progress in that. But the other thing that we could do is we could sort of collectively, a lot of what we're going to talk about in the rest of this presentation is separating environment from genetic in order to make progress at home on your home farm. We could take some examples of some of the things that you all are trying to do at home. You know, I didn't turn the mic on, I just realized. And actually just sit here and build a selection process, which is what I was planning on doing in this seminar anyway. And just, you know, you tell me what you're trying to accomplish, and call it free consulting or exasperating input, either way you want to look at it. Maybe together we can think about some things. And what we'll do in that process is essentially develop a selection index. So you can see with all these different EPDs which things for what you're trying to accomplish you should weight most heavily, and which traits maybe you should weight less heavily in order to try and accomplish your specific goals. Okay? So you all think a little bit about what you want to do, and when I get through the rest of this, then we'll sort of poll the group again and decide what to do with what time we have left. How about that? So, just to do a little stand-up. Yes, sir? We can try. They told me not to touch anything, so. It was the last thing my wife said before I came up here. Don't touch anything. Okay. All right. So let's start out with the obvious. When I go down to when I'm up here doing presentations, I always tell everybody, you know, I can get a lot of money for a heifer like that in North Carolina. When I'm in North Carolina, I tell everybody I can get a lot of money for a heifer like that in West Virginia. So I'm just full disclosure, you know, depends on what state you're in, what state you pick on. How many of you all have done AI? Okay, good. I tell you what the fascinating thing is about this heifer in all seriousness. She is not stuck. She is not stuck. We thought when we got there that she had been in there, we estimated about 6 or 7 hours based on the last time anybody had been through that field and so forth. Obviously she was eating acorns. She came in a fork in a tree and she raised her head up. She is not physically stuck. Happy. And that just fascinated us when we got there. This is the black box that we've all heard about breeding AI. She would not move, and I don't think I've ever seen one so calm. There's nothing halter broke or anything. I mean, I got to her and just rubbed on her. I just assumed she was choking, you know. And she just absolutely would not move, but would not back up. We finally got that heifer out. I buckled both of her front knees as if I was going to shoe her. and took her down like a camel, and then got on top of her and pushed down on her neck with two guys on each side of her, and we folded her back just like you see an elephant get up at the circus. And when she got it into light, she didn't run off. She just stood up very quietly and just walked away. This heifer had never been handled in her life. So I don't even know what that means, but it was a pretty cool experience, actually. So, you know, I'm thinking we might put a tree in front of our head gate. I don't know. All right. I think where we stopped is, it was my forest for the trees. It's just a great transition slide. So I'm going to assume, for the purposes of what we're fixing to do, that everybody was in the other session, and we're just going to start right there and just push through the rest of these, okay? If that's not true, tell me now. And in a smaller room like this, I'm all about back and forth. So stop me at any point, interrupt me, refute me. I love that. If you guys have ever been around Garish, Jim Garish and I are pretty good friends, and it's always entertaining when we're both on the same program at the same time, because we spend most of our time taking digs at each other and a little bit of time talking about the topics. So. Okay, what am I doing wrong? My clicker's not clicking. You want to just manually advance it to the next slide, and I'll start talking while you... Oh, cool. The PowerPoint is stuck in the tree. All right, good deal.
That happens from time to time.
Good, good. All right. I got a $100 bill in my pocket that I will take out and publicly give to anybody that can tell me the breed combination or the breed, if you perceive it as one breed, in this female. Bless you, my child, because it does not, and I get to keep my $100. No. This is a dairy animal. Okay? How many dairy animals do you see that look like this? Color pattern, granted, but do you see how incredibly easy fleshing she is? Do you note her type, bone for that stage of her life? And incidentally, this is a heifer, it's not a bull. I had this sent to my wife's email, and she calls me on the phone and says, he sent you a picture of a bull, not a heifer. And she was a sucker, so they put a sucker ring in her nose is all it is. I thought that was kind of cool. Yeah, yeah, that's right. Now, she does have a little bit of Jersey in her, but I've already kept my $100, but we're going in the right direction. She is a three-way cross. This is my dairy project. I thought it would be fun to talk about that a little bit so that we're sort of capturing concepts and thoughts as opposed to specifically the cattle at our deal. We got very interested in this particular breed about 10 years ago. This is a Normandy Holstein Jersey three-way cross. And we're having fun with a handful of guys around the country. I love the project. I love trying to push that ball uphill against the odds and do something creative. What I hear in the dairy industry more than anything else is fertility problems. What we have built our beef reputation on is fertility success. And despite what the tables will tell you, we believe that fertility is highly heritable. We just haven't figured out a very good way scientifically to describe it. But we know that we get more benefit from crossbreeding of all the traits with fertility than anything else. So there are some dairies out there already that are crossing Holsteins to Jerseys to change cow size and milk quality, but their real objective is to try and get fertility back up. Because we have backed ourselves into a corner, especially in the Holstein breed. I mean, I think our current fertility rates running as a breed nationally right now are about 18%. that's a problem. So I have convinced a handful of dairies around that let's try this as a third breed. So let me show you just a few Normandies, straight bred Normandy cattle. That's what a Normandy looks like. These cattle, these pictures were taken less than a week ago. These cattle are on only grass in a rotation in the wintertime with about a 75% hay feeding daily. So we're forcing them to forage for the rest of it, okay? Now they do rotate. And we know, those of us that have done a fair bit of that there's a little more out there even in the wintertime than most of us realize, okay? But I want you to see how relatively easy fleshing they are, okay? Now what's cool about Normandies? Normandies are one of the old dual-purpose breeds out of Europe, but what's especially interesting to me and the reason I got involved in them is they are the oldest continued domesticated breed still in existence. How old are they? The Vikings in the 9th century dropped the Normandy cattle off when they invaded the Normans. That's pretty old, okay? And yet they're still in existence. They're not around because they didn't do something right. Now, let's think about selection for a minute. My guess is, and it's just anecdotal opinion, that the Vikings probably weren't the best managers in the world and probably didn't, take exceptionally good care of their stock, and that they probably had them in some pretty harsh environments. So one of the things that you'll find interesting about the Normandies is, without any selection for it, it turns out they're high altitude cattle. They're used, the highest concentration of them is in Colombia above 15,000 feet elevation for dairy purposes. And, the whole breed's like that. They just can adapt to that kind of stuff. In Europe, they have the highest milk protein content among the recognized breeds, and of those breeds that are dual purpose, if raised only on grass, in the older database, it will tell you that they have more marbling. Now, if you put them in a conventional feedlot, they're average to slightly below average at best, okay? It's not what they're designed to do. So I think that their hardiness, their longevity, that's a 13-year-old cow. There's some things that they could bring to the dairy equation. They're not exceptionally good uddered cattle among the dairy cattle, which is why haven't found their way into the mainstream population. And they don't have peak milk production, which is probably a good thing because they're not exceptionally good uddered cattle. So our strategy is we're taking Holsteins, breeding them to Jerseys, and then we're putting Normandies back on that cross, which was the heifer we looked at. Okay, so there's a three-way. We'll calve her, and then we'll stick the wettest Holstein bull we can find right back in. And we'll do a turn. So the goal is to get the fertility, the fleshing ability, the functionality, the feet and legs right here, and the temperament. These are extremely docile cattle, and when you stick the Jersey in with the Holstein, all of a sudden you start having some comments about that from your dairy guys. Yes, Ed? No, this is an F2, and then we'll go back with a Holstein next, and we'll do it all over again. And so they will adjust for milk quantity and quality with their choice of Holstein and Jersey sires that they come back, and then we'll go again. Now, whether we'll have to keep every 3 turns coming back with Normandy, or whether we get it leveled out, and then they, but the dairy industry probably, even with this, will do what they always do, which is they'll like everything about her, but they want to add another 15,000 pounds of milk to her, and they'll screw it all up in 2 generations. But we think we're going somewhere. I wanted y'all to see those cattle because I don't expect it's something you see very often up the road. That's kind of what they look like. I think they're sort of cool. They actually have kind of that Jersey dish shape to their face, and they're sort of Ayrshire in their roan color. And I just think they're cool. You know, they're kind of fun. Bobby tells me that she just loves her shorthorn cows, and if she didn't have shorthorns out there, she probably wouldn't even have her farm, because they just bring her.
Good over.
I love my Normandies.
Thanks.
I mean, I don't have enough time to play golf. Okay. Now, let's pull back to some of what we're doing with our heifers and get back on topic a little bit with specific selection. The Normandy example is just an example of how you're using complementary breeds to achieve a particular goal outside of the specific EPDs, okay? I'm going to shift gears a little bit. We're going to talk about trying to take a lot of variables out of a selection process and then in a focused way put in a specific variable that you want to select for, okay? These are some relatively freshly weaned spring calving heifers from this past fall, okay? We're all sitting there probably November, maybe the first week of December, I'm guessing, on that picture. You know, they've come out of the weaning lots, they've been commingled, they've had all their booster shots and been wormed, and they're starting down through their grazing rotation, that's right at my house, the picture that I started the presentation with that long Max Q field, and they're going to graze down through about 90 acres rotationally that's stockpiled. Now, you know, they're relatively uniform. We kind of like that about them. There's 4 different breed combinations and 2 different primary composite lines there. But, you know, it's just a set of heifers. I could not resist, even on a rainy day, taking a picture of the fact that they're cycling. That's what Tucker Family Farms does. Now, that picture is the same heifers last Monday. Okay? What they have eaten since the first picture and last Monday is what I just told you. 90 acres of Max Q. In this particular contemporary group, there's 84 heifers. Okay? They're still cycling. All right? Now, the first thing you'll notice is they're a little raw. How in the world am I going to breed them in May? Okay? Keep those pictures in your mind. This is what we're going to sell in April. This would be the fall version of the same product. When we started with this set of heifers, same genetics, they look just like that. Okay? These heifers are too fat, incidentally. We got into a particular byproduct feed this year that overshot it by a body condition score. I'd like for them actually to be a little bit less fleshy. But the point is, we ended up with a very acceptable product that will meet our customers' needs and will be very saleable. People are going to like the looks of them. And we did not starve our heifers to get them there, but we did get them there in a planned strategy. Why do we want to do that? All right, Zach, jump back to our slides now. Think about that a little bit. Keep those pictures in your mind. So in designing a selection system and separating environment from genetics, so we understand the 2 different influences and their antagonisms, we have to set some goals. Now, in our business, we really try hard to be all things to all people while being focused on those things that we know everybody wants. We do finish all of our steers in Kansas in traditional lots with an electronic sorting system, so we have individual data on every single mating. Nothing's killed by a pin. They're all tracked individually. And they all have an optimum harvest endpoint that allows us to get a little bit better information than we otherwise would get. And we use those carcass traits in our selection process. Big point from the other room. First big point. Carcass is highly heritable. Okay? Select for those things that are highly heritable using genetic influences, and then challenge your population with environmental challenges to allow them to self-sort for traits that are lowly heritable. Bounce back heifer development. Growth traits. They've got to have growth traits in order to hit the carcass window, but in order to breed, they've got to be of a certain size and a certain fleshing ability and the ability to bounce back. Keep thinking about bounce back. Maternal traits, they've got to be wet enough to get the calf where we need it to be, but also be within a wet boundary that allows them to breed back. Behavior issues, that's a whole nother presentation that we can jump to if we have time or not, but highly heritable. There are some nuances in behavior that we are constantly trying to get a better understanding for, and abnormal behavior at calving and flight behavior are not the same things, and one is genetic and one is hormonal, and so we have to know which ones we're selecting for and how we're going to fix them. Nutritional response, this is the bounce back concept, the ability to go to a certain point and get back to a certain point and yet still function in the real world. And reproductive efficiency, which we oftentimes think about as nutritional response, but actually it's a very different equation. I've raised 3 daughters, love my girls to death, have learned lots of things about girls along the way and lots of their friends. The 2 quick things that I'll say about heifers and daughters, that both of which are very similar. One is that when you come down to the dinner table and your daughter is somewhere between 11 and a half and 13, and you're sitting there and you're just having casual conversation, everybody's coming in, and she's unusually quiet. And you look over at her and her hands are folded like this. And she's got her head tilted just a little bit. And she's doing this weird thing with her eyelashes where she's going like this. And you look at her, and it appears that she put the entire box of magic markers on her eyelids. That's the day as a father that your life changes for about 5 to 6 years. And she's this beautiful little thing that loves you so much, and in about 5 or 6 years, she's going to love you so much again. But in those 5 or 6 years, from the day she discovers eye makeup till you get out on the other side and she's almost through college, she's a heifer. She doesn't have any idea what she's doing, and she wants to run with the herd and go in any direction, okay? So you have to manage that process a little bit, okay? That's my first observation. The other observation that sounds negative, but it's very relevant in terms of what we're doing with these heifers, with some of their friends and the bigger population around the school system, skinny girls get pregnant too. And we have decided for some reason in heifer development that we have to make them fat before we breed them. And that has absolutely nothing to do with anything. What we have done, and Bobby did a great job of pointing this out in her presentation yesterday, from roughly 1960 to 1980, all the reproductive theory was we had to make them as fat as we could, get them to a certain point before we bred them the first time, because our goal was 100% pregnancy. I'm here today to tell you that the most valuable heifer in your operation is the open heifer, not the bred one. Because how many open heifers you have, if you've done everything else right, determines the selection pressure that you're putting on the ones that you do get bred. So if you are getting 100% of them bred, you're probably not doing much selection for fertility. So you really have to sort of turn around what you're thinking about, okay? So that's how we thought, we're going to sit down, we're going to develop something called bounce back heifer development. And the first thing that we were challenged by is we had to take some of the noise out of the system. Noise is just like adjusting the radio, okay? That's your environmental influence. So sort of repeating a little bit what I said, traits that vary in terms of the environment noise complicate that selection process. If you don't take as much of noise out as possible, so you actually are doing genetic selection, then you're not going to be able to make progress because you're covering it up with noise, with environmental stuff. If you bounce around in your management from one year to the next, if you develop your heifers differently from one year to the next, you're not going to accomplish anything. So you have to think through that process, and we spent a lot of time trying to think through how do we create a drought? How do we create a blizzard? How do we create a nutritional / environmental challenge in our heifer development so we can not really sort for the ones that are impacted by that challenge, but sort for the ones that can bounce back? Sort for the ones that when the nutrition plane got better, when the drought was over, when it rained, when the spring came and the blizzard was behind them, could rapidly respond to an improvement in their environment and start cycling. That was our goal, that was our objective, and that's what we started working on. So we had to make some assumptions. As I just said, the traits with high heritabilities have less noise, but does that assume that the uniform environment? The point I just made. The traits with low heritabilities have lots of noise. The reason we say fertility is not very highly heritable is we've done a crappy job as scientists figuring out what the real heritability of fertility is. I made that point early on in the presentation over in the other room. And then there are some traits that are dually influenced. Temperament is a great example. And I've got another presentation that talks about behavior and how you select and help these eye makeup wearing little girls overcome their behavior challenges in order to become productive cows. And a whole lot of that is how you handle them just prior to and during the experience of their first calving. You can imprint anything. What would you? Any species. So sometimes we want to jump on genetics when in fact we, the managers, i.e. the environment, are really the problem. Because when you think about management, the reality is that we assume, and this slide's supposed to build, but it came out of an old PowerPoint, so pretend you don't see the reality line just for a second. We assume that, you know, our time is experience, and experience is better management, right? I think all of us sort of feel that way. Boy, if I knew when I was like what I know now, golly. And I'm just getting better and better all the time. And, you know, let's talk about reality for a second. I probably should be doing that with the pointer. Does it work? Okay. I'm gonna share with you that here's my concept. We assume that our skill goes up with more experience, but here's what really happens in life, all right? Right here, this is where we are, although the day we graduate from college, we think we're right here, okay?
Wow, that was really great. I got up this morning.
We are right here from a grass stand. But we're all excited and we're filled with vim and vigor and we've got all that new knowledge and you know, we just can't wait to get out there and share our experiences and even though we maybe take some early hits, boy, we do learn a lot and our management just gets better and we're tweaking it and we're doing great. But life is not friendly. Somewhere along the way, there's a death in the family, we lose rental property, there's a divorce, there's a bankruptcy. It doesn't always go the way you plan. There's a drought. There's a couple of drought years in a row. There's a blizzard. God is good every day. Because I would argue that right here, when you have weathered that storm, for the first time in your management journey, you started learning, and right here is when you really get it together. Okay? I had to breed heifers for 20 years by everything that I was taught in college in the early 80s to figure out that somebody had to start doing something different because I wasn't meeting my goals. How was I not meeting my goals? I had too many open, wet 2-year-olds and too many open, wet 3-year-olds for the expense that I was putting into developing heifers. Okay? The cool thing about this management curve is all this stuff is so important to you, and then right here, something happens. You know what that something is? That's grandchildren. And it's not important anymore. So God's good every day. All right. Here's the other. So the first exasperation and noise is us. Okay? See my point? We are our own worst enemies. The second exasperation is this reality. Now this is 50 years worth of Virginia data, okay? But it could be anywhere. My observation with this slide, as simple as it is that when you have ample to excessive moisture, the temperature is relatively low no matter what time of the year. And when you have deficient moisture, the temperature is high relative to whatever time of the year it is. I.e., in the wintertime, it tends to be wetter. In the middle of the summer, it tends to be hotter. In the middle of the summer, it tends to be drier. In the middle of the winter, it's wetter. Okay? The book says that our cattle have to get, based on the tables, which that's a whole other conversation about research, need this level of nutrition every day. But the world looks like this. We have to figure out a way to develop animals that can express themselves in a variable world with lots of noise. So the environment outside of our control is part of the noise. So let's think about how we're going to use these multiple traits at once and develop a selection system. First of all, believe and use the EPDs. Hopefully I made that point over in the other presentation. There's just too much data out there to refute them, and we're way past that stage in the thought process. But if you want to put a system together, what you got to figure out is what is your actual target, and then eliminate as much of that noise as possible in developing a selection system. Then add back some specific noise, i.e. a challenge, whatever the challenge is that you're trying to address. And then try and design a unique management specific trial that gives you useful data, because you're narrowing it down now to one thing that you're trying to do, as opposed to exasperating it by trying to do a bunch of things at the same time. Be disciplined in your approach, and don't forget that it takes 5 years to turn a generation, and you'll make real progress. So in putting a system together, you have to combine behavior, nutrition, reproduction, but the hardest thing is you have to put it in a thought process that accurately describes your management, and most of us don't want to look in the mirror. You know, if you're selling to customers and you want them to have a positive experience, you better be managing your process in a way that's reflective of what your expectations are of your customers. Just remember from the other presentation, I said you can definitely manage to cover up bad genetics, but it'll come back to bite you when it doesn't work out for them, okay? Then use the genetic tools, some of which we talked about this morning, and others we're about to get into. Be ruthless in your selection, and you can win and will win the environment versus genetic battle. Because I have a little bit of a contrarian philosophy. We select genetically for high heritability traits, i.e. carcass as an example, and then we add environmental pressure to select for type based on our management. Let me back up for a minute. So here's what we've tried to do with bounce back heifer development. It's a good place to insert this into the deal. We were looking for those heifers, as I say, that would bounce back when they met a nutritional challenge. So what we did with those girls, and remember those pictures from those weanlings compared to the end point, we put them through a nutritional grazing process where we start out with very high quality forage. We move them right on through just like they're supposed to until we get to the last stage of the rotation. Then we close the gates, shut down the deal. Our intention is to have them lose one body condition score. All right? Now, some things will happen when you do that. And we don't starve them. We'll put straw in there if they've actually run out of forage, okay? In the fall ones, it's a little bit easier to do than the spring ones, incidentally. And different times of the year, that body condition is impacted by different things in the environment. And it really doesn't matter what those things are. You're just trying to get an impact. It could be extreme cold. It could be wind. In the summer, it's typically heat. That might take 3 weeks to slide if it's really hot, or it might take 5 weeks if it's a pretty seasonable summer, okay? And the challenge is when you have a really wet summer and you just can't ever get the grass to stop growing, you know, and you really have to snub them down. But we want them to lose a body condition score, okay? And then remember, I was in the sheep business. What do we do? What do we do to get more lambs? Flush them nutritionally, exactly. So after we do this slide, which is our artificial drought, you with me now? Our artificial blizzard. A very specific period of time. Then we bring them back up nutritionally for 45 days. Breed them AI on a time breeding, only select from the AI matings. That complicated. In 12 years, we have improved our wet 2-year-old conception rates by 22%, our wet 3-year-old conception rates, I just ran this math, this is a new number because I hadn't looked at it in 3 years, by 26%. we fixed our other problem.
Dark color.
And what we think we've done is we early identified those females that were not able to bounce back when their nutritional plane improved no matter what we did because they never got over the challenge. Artificially creating, if you will, the challenge of a wet 2-year-old's first lactation. Because it still comes down to nutritional deprivation. Everybody follow me? Now, there are people that would say I'm starving my heifers. You know, that's unfortunate. That's absolutely not what we're doing. Which is why I want to make sure that you saw the end product. We take very good care of our heifers. But we want a heifer that, even if your management is less than stellar, even if your environment is less than stellar, is going to work on the other end. So we had to do some things along the way. Here's what happened. First 2 years, we went from excellent AI experience down to about 40% AI conception. By year 3, we were starting to creep back up. By year 6, we had the highest AI conception rates we'd ever had. We just ultrasounded 2 days ago the sale heifers, and it looks like we're going to be at 68% one breeding time AI on that particular set of heifers. And this spring we're trying something cool. Tom, you'll appreciate this. It's our new thing. I've always got to be messing with it. We're gonna not use cleanup bulls this spring on those heifers. We're gonna go in on day 13 and put a cedar back in. Ultrasound on day 22 for the presence of a CL.
And they move from
The ones that have CL, the GnRH shot.
travelers to grab onto.
Different programs that have been quietly doing this off-label with the cedars. We think we can achieve 85% AI conception in a 22-day window with no cleanup bull. And that could be cool. There's some things going on reproductively, especially in spring breeding pastures with fescue on the bull side that I'm jumping off topic here, but this is so cool if y'all don't know about this. John Andre and the group down at Clemson may be on the verge of what's going to be the most illuminating piece of work on fescue in the past 50 years. And I am jumping off topic, but I think this is important, so let's park this for a second. What they have discovered, and they're just building a database so it will pass peer review for scientific literature, but they know they have results. We all understand that the fescue phenomena causes vasoconstriction, which is essentially sort of a diabetic-like effect to the extremities. That's why they have long hair, because of the hair follicles. That's why the switches fall off. That's why we get fescue foot. That's why in the wintertime we can get the fescue rings and actually have, you know, a real calamity with that, which incidentally is frostbite, is where the rings coming from, is where the real foot damage is coming from, but it's vasoconstriction. The blood's not flowing down to the end of the extremity, okay? What they have figured out in Clemson is that we've always assumed that summer sterility on bulls is a function of external temperature, which arguably it could be, and the way we have selected to keep bulls fertile in the summertime, one of the methods is distension of testicles, to try, you know, using breeds of a color that reflect heat better. There's a lot of different things to try and keep the semen at the right temperature in the testes when the temperature outside is above optimum, okay? What they are onto now, and it's just a beautiful piece of work, is they have thought through it and figured out that the same vasoconstriction that's occurring in the rest of the extremities is occurring in the vascular tissue around the tunica dartis muscle. I don't mean to jump too scientific on you all, but that's the muscle in the scrotum that pulls the testes up or down when it's cold or hot. Well, if the fescue is causing vasoconstriction in that area and the testicles are pulled up even though it's hot, the body temperature of the bull, not the external temperature, is causing the bull to go sterile. Here's the cool thing. They have identified breed differences for this trait. And it may be the first wave that we're going to be able to find breed variation in terms of tolerance to the fescue endophyte. I mean, it is cool, edgy stuff. in the short run, without the scientific literature out, my recommendation to my clients this year for the first time is going to be, if you're using natural service bulls in a spring, early summer breeding program, I'm going to advise them to train those bulls to about 8 to 10 pounds of other feed daily. We're going to recommend corn gluten, with the idea being just the bull. You just go out there with a tub and feed him during the breeding season. So his total consumption is diluted from the fescue to try and negate the effect. We've thought all along it was the heifer that was the problem. It might be the other way around. It might be the bull, and it might not be external temperature. This is really new, cutting-edge stuff that I'm really excited about. I didn't mean to jump off topic, but it's cool. That's why we're doing the 2 AIs, though, Tom, is so we don't have that exasperation. We won't have the bull at all in those spring herds. We'll use natural service cleanup in the fall, but we may actually move away on the heifer side from anything in terms of actual bulls. Kind of jumped off there for a minute, but it's cool new stuff. All right, so what you see is that I added an environmental challenge to the heifers, then gave them an environmental opportunity, changing nutritional plane, and then selected from heifers that had that experience. Among a pool of heifers, all of whom had met my carcass and maternal genetic sorting with different breed combinations to qualify to be in the first place, okay? So one of the things you have to watch on this as you go along is you have to correlate your heifer reproductive performance, which in most systems is sort of age of puberty and subsequent maturity, to the optimum finishing point on the steer side of the equation if you don't want to have cow size get out of hand. Okay? Now, we're making them bigger and bigger out west all the time. A little bit of that is genetic. Well, actually, a lot of it is genetic. But
Don't need to.
a whole lot of it, too, is that we're just feeding them longer and making them bigger. And that's what the packers are asking for. That's going to be a challenge to us in the East. They're trying to work with cattle on grass, no question about that. But I get a lot of questions about cow size. Here's the way I think about cow size. As most good extension answers, it depends. But your goal should be, with your breeding program, that whatever your female line is and whatever breed combination you have, that the steers out of that mating will work in a conventional feedlot in terms of being acceptable to that industry as far as whether or not the end product will fit the box. The heifers out of that mating be a little closer to the edge, depending on where you want to be size-wise, because if you're going to grass finish the heifers, not the steers, because you can get them there. You've got the beauty of the hormonal influence, which the steers don't give you. It just works easier and softer as long as you can work around the heat issue. So the real take-home point here, big point is, if you're finishing cattle as we are, we know what those finished weights are. And those finished weights are going to correlate very closely with what your mature cow size is. So if you're finishing steers and they're consistently in the 1,350 to 1,400 pound range when they're done in the feedlot, don't be surprised that your 1,175 pound cows that you talk about at the coffee shop with your friends, when they actually go across the scale, turn out to weigh 1,350 to 1,400 pounds. Okay? Because those are the genetics that you're using. All right? Utilize hybrid vigor. Crossbreeding, makes all the sense in the world. I think even the goat was having a good time, personally. And seek crossbred solutions. You can tweak this system. There's so much opportunity with putting breed combinations together in a way that achieve goals beyond what we can explain genetically. And don't get hung up on color. There's 2 colors that matter in the beef cattle business, and that's red and white. And you can't see either one until after you take the hide off.
Yeah.
Those are bounce-back heifers in a fall group that have just completed their growth. And they're about to go to the lot. They're not starved, deprived.
That will
from where they were at weaning, they have lost a body condition score. That's the environment they're in our system. Make sure you keep a lot of mineral, especially make sure you keep a lot of water. Keep an eye on them, and think about this body condition thing that people get hung up on as the average of the group. Because some of them won't melt. Some of them will melt more than you want them to, and you think, well, she's never going to work out. But guess what? Skinny girls get pregnant too. And we have assumed that external body fat and fertility were the same thing. Sometimes fat girls don't get pregnant. Okay? Opportunities. Now, that's the end of what we were supposed to be doing in there. How much time we got left?
A little over 5 minutes, about 7 minutes.
Oh, is that all? Oh, cool. We don't even need to jump topic. Let's just visit.
How long does this environmental challenge, how long do you make that and it benefit us on a normal breeding to do that to our heifers? Not AI or anything.
I think it is a benefit. I think you got to walk before you run. You know, a lot of the people that back out from us are because they believe in what we're doing and understand that we've already ridden through the rough times, figuring out what's too much and what's not enough. I think the key is that you don't get hung up on so many days. It's sort of like, you know, when we were first learning how to rotationally graze, the first thing everybody wants to do is this many days per paddock. And, you know, it isn't very long in your understanding of that process before you realize that means absolutely nothing. And you're going to move them through based on forage availability and height and quality and all these other things. It's sort of that way with the slide part of that. What we actually do is we run the heifers through 5 at a time through a gate. And we have 2 people that is not us that we ask to come in, and they put down their body condition score on the average of those 5 as they go through, okay? And then when we think we're there, we bring them back in. We bring them into the dry lot, and it's not terribly sophisticated, but we want the body condition score that our evaluators gave us to start with to drop by 1 body condition score. That's what we're trying to do. We don't, because we think if we go more than that, now we're screwing up the heifer. But, you know, Bobby presented a bunch of really good information that compensatory gain is your friend in heifer development, and you can still get there. There's a dairy heifer development process called stair-step nutrition, where you feed them at this level for so many days, and then you feed them at this level for so many days, and you feed them at this level for so many days. And there's some good sound reasons for doing that. But at the end of the day, if you think about that process, if you take the total number of megacalories that you project that your heifers need to develop to the size you want them to get to, and you divide that by the number of days, okay, you can, in development, feed those heifers a uniform number of those megacalories per day to get them to your end point. Or you can feed them a bunch of megacalories in the second half of their development and a bunch less in the first half of their development, and the data says that there's no difference in terms of cow longevity, the way the heifers breed. So if you're thinking about nothing except interest cost, buy and feed, labor resources, feeding them really well for a shorter period of time prior to breeding, that in and of itself has a benefit in terms of the practical side of the operation, even if we weren't trying to do something genetically. But the key is you got to begin with the end in mind and know where you want to get them to. Don't let them slide too hard, but you want them to slide enough that you put some selection pressure on them. Did I answer that or make it complicated? Something else. Ed.
I have 2 questions. The first one would be, how do you feel about feeding and fat acquisition in your heifers of that quality?
You know, our heifers this spring are too fat. I mean, I said that. I think they're about a body condition score fatter than I want them to be. I think that you have to be really thoughtful from where these heifers are right now to where they're going to be in September. And, you know, you can level them back out in terms of number of animal units per acre in your grazing management. And, you know, the heifer, from the time she's purchased from me to the time she calves, there's still a whole lot of stuff that needs to be done right. And that's the period of time, in my estimation, that you want her not to continue to get fatter, and you actually want her to kind of level off and be where she needs to be. There may be others in the room that can speak more fluently to fat deposition than others. You know, a lot of that is post-pubescent, but it's primarily as they're building towards the first lactation that you have to be concerned, if I understand the literature properly. The tweaking right around the actual period of breeding, when these heifers are 14 months old, probably is not as influenced as we one time thought. But it depends on whether you keep going with it. Okay, good question though. Yes, sir.
Just a quick 2 minutes on your behavioral.
Yeah. Yeah, and I couldn't pull those slides up that fast with what time we have left, but the real quick version of what we do when we're calving heifers, we got pretty serious about disposition a few years ago, and I make mistakes. You know, I plugged a guilty bull back into our occasion in our red composite a couple years ago, and I sold 2 different guys this past fall out of our spring calving group, 2 different heifers, both of which I knew had disposition problems, told them up front. They saw them for what they were, that this is not something, but they were pounding on me because if it was pregnant and had 4 legs this past fall, everybody wanted to buy it. And I cut the price in half and told them, I said, look, I'm just going to take her to the market. If you want her for that, that's fine, but no harm, no foul. 2 different guys buy a lot of heifers from me. Both of them had issues at calving because in both cases, you know, she just got squirrely on them, and one of them, you know, just ran away from the calf on a cold, windy night, and the other one actually stepped on the calf. And both of those guys have called me and given me a hard time because you know, the heifer was exactly what I told them she was. You know, I'm smarter than that. I never should have even shown those heifers to those guys, but you know, they came to buy 12 and I only had 11 that day, you know, that kind of thing. So we know the kind we don't want, and we certainly, getting back to production genetics and marketing, we certainly don't want to sell those, no question about it. But more importantly, from a selection process, we wanted to get rid of all those kind of heifers. You know, any group of cattle that hasn't been handled with people are going to have certain issues. So there's a handling process that we go through. What we actually do is, starting 3 to 5 weeks, depending on forage availability, when we move our bred heifers into our calving pasture, we will go out there and we start giving them 3 pounds of corn gluten, started on the ground and then to a trough and so forth. Really doesn't have anything to do with nutrition. It's just about us being around them, walking around them, getting them used to us. And you'll figure out pretty quick in big groups of heifers, there's always going to be one that's going to be more nervous than the others. And you can kind of figure out who she is. And she's either going to come around or she's not. Then we have sort of a planned protocol that I use with my guys. One of them is these portable troughs. When we think that we've got them coming to us all right, we'll go out there and we'll take one of these big portable troughs, and I tell the guys to go out there the first day and throw it across the ground and make as much noise as you possibly can. And they scatter to the 4 winds like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? But the second day they figure out that noise didn't hurt them. You know, they scatter less. The 3rd day they're looking at you like, why are you doing this stupid thing? You know. Then we start feeding them in that same trough. Oh my gosh, it made a lot of noise, but it's our pretty. Okay. So you want to, you know, here's this teenage eye makeup wearing girl. You want her to figure out that life's not going to come to a crash, because what you don't want to have happen is her have a dystocia event on the night of a thunderstorm. Okay? So we added another piece to that equation. I have a neighbor who's president of the Virginia Bear Hunters Association. He has a lot of dogs. And we actually moved our calving pasture to the block right beside his house. So they hear a lot of noises. And we have sort of forced them to kind of understand that noise doesn't all come at the same time of day or in the same kind of way. And we found that to be very helpful. And the last thing, if you really want to be hard on yourself about and get really serious about your heifer calving, is when we did that, we made a conscious decision. Our heifer calving pasture is 1/2 mile from the nearest head gate. Now, I'm not gonna say that we never, ever have an issue. But I will say that if you have to get them a half a mile to be able to help them, two things happen. First of all, is you never forget the one you had to help, and you don't make that mistake no matter what it was genetically again. But secondly, you
Gonna get more involved.
put them in dispositional, because you want to have them lay out in the middle of the field and let you help them. That's our goal. Is to not just have them calm and responsive, but calm enough that we can reasonably help them in the field. Now, that may require a halter to a bumper of a truck. And we haven't brought a heifer to the barn, even with a calving problem, in probably 5 years, with the exception of twice when we had a missed straw of semen. Calf insider weighs 115 pounds because the technician pulled the wrong straw. You know, that's not going to happen in the field. Okay? And they tell me we're out of time. Thank y'all.
We have a gift we want to give you here for your presentation, and it's West Virginia, made in West Virginia.
All right,
for
fantastic.
Special people.